Welcome to the J.D. Levy and Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share.
Welcome, everybody, to this month's episode of the Calibration Point Podcast. I'm excited to have Sherri Chaney Jones with us from an organization that is called SureImpact. And I think this will be enlightening for all of us as we talk about impact. So, Sherri, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. You're the CEO of SureImpact. So maybe just as a quick start, could you tell us why you built a company around impact and what that even means?
Sure. Thank you, Jamie. It's exciting to be here. And I love to talk about impact. And as much as I love to talk about impact, I like to talk about what impact is not, which is which I think sometimes the word impact, especially since the last 5 years that I started the company, gets thrown around a lot. And I think this is the perfect question to ask. What is it and what is it not? And why would I start a company that even had it in its title? So my whole career, 20 plus years, has been helping nonprofits, government entities, social enterprises define basically how do they quantify and measure their impact. So what is it? How are they changing lives and changing circumstances? And how do we measure that? And even across those 20 years, I found that it was nonprofits were struggling with this particular process. One, because of the word impact is so elusive, right?
Right.
A lot of times people think impact means number of clients served or number of, families that engaged in their programming. And I learned at a really early age in my career that is not a great metric for impact, is the number of people we serve. Because I was working in a juvenile court and my job was to evaluate the impact of the juvenile courts to look at how we kept young people out of the juvenile justice system after they went through a program that we court ordered them to go through. And unfortunately, we learned that we were making some young people worse, meaning we were increasing the likelihood that they would come back into the juvenile justice system than had we not made them go through that intervention at all. And so I think that's where my fuel and my passion has always stemmed from, was realizing that this metric of number of people served through a nonprofit program does not ensure, so here we go, SureImpact, does not ensure that we're changing their lives or changing circumstances. And so it should not be the only metric nonprofits use when they talk about the impact they're making in the community, because we don't know if we really are creating the mission statements that we say we want to.
It's a really good point, and that's something that we run into a lot, obviously, as you know, and just helping people differentiate in evaluation between outputs and outcomes, and then how they create that collective series of changes to drive impact. And I'm glad that you hit on just how much diversity there can be in this field on what we mean by the word impact, and even more importantly, to what you're really focused on, which is making sure that we are thinking through and measuring the correct things around our organizations. There was a study I read or actually heard years ago, in probably about 5-6 years ago, and I may hatch this stat by 1 or 2 percentage points, but basically it was a national study, and they said that 86% of nonprofit leaders said that they regularly use data in their organizations. And then they went back and asked them, basically, how confident are you in the data that you're using, like to be able to use it? And only 6% of that 86% said that they were confident in being able to use the data, but 86% of them said that they were, collecting and trying to use data, but only 6% were confident in using it. Is that something that you see in the field as well?
Yeah, that is definitely something we see, or something we also see. And I've done similar research, slightly different lens, but looking at, we found that close to the same numbers, 89% of nonprofit leaders have data related to their programs but only 25% have data that actually tells them if they're making a difference. So I think nonprofits have been asked to collect data from funders or other things, but what they're struggling with is the so what. And that's what SureImpact helps our users know is the so what. So I have all this data. What do I do with it? What does it tell me? How do I use it? How do I feel confident that I can use it to make decisions or to tell our story? Because that data is just a means to an end, in my opinion. Data should just be a means to an end to achieve your organizational goals.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And what do you find, as you've worked with so many different kinds of organizations, are there a couple of general rules that organizations can use to start to clarify, is this of value, or am I capturing the right information? Just the point that you made about the big differential, it's something we see a lot in the field, and that is, that funders and donors are asking for data that's not even germane to actually creating positive change. And the organizations then end up having to, because they don't have their own systems, kind of bend to whatever the funder is asking in absence of having their own approach. What do you find is most helpful in helping an organization start to clarify this picture?
Yeah, I think, I love that you use the word clarify. I didn't even ask you to use that word, but and I really, any good measurement strategy, clarify is the first step. So it is getting a real, and the exercise that we have nonprofits take is what I call the 5 whys exercise. And so, because if you go into your nonprofit and you're like, all right, guys, what are our outcomes? People will they freeze. They're like, that sounds so academic and so scary, and I don't know what those are. But if you ask a nonprofit, what are your whys? Why do you do what you do? Why do your funders and partners want to partner with you? And why do your participants want to engage in your services? What are they hoping to accomplish? When you ask yourself those questions, that's what you should be measuring. And when you would want to talk about impact. Because if let's say you're a training and development organization, your whys are probably around increasing some sort of knowledge or skill or ability. Maybe you're a coaching or counseling nonprofit. Your whys are probably around maintaining a new behavior. If you're an advocacy nonprofit, your whys are probably around changing the hearts and minds and attitudes of constituents so they'll, care about a cause or change their behavior. So when we get really clear on these whys, that essentially is what your outcome should be. That's what you want to know, and that's what you want to measure. Is your nonprofit achieving those whys for the people and the beneficiaries and the communities that you serve?
So you bring up something really interesting, and I just want to clarify for myself. And so what you're resonating on for me, which is really great, and that is, one, clarifying what it is, why we are serving. What we always say is, what is missing in society, our why, why are we here? But what I really like what you're adding to that is understanding the why for the beneficiary and ensuring that there's alignment between what can be at times. The organization may know that there's a certain reason for something that they have to do that the beneficiary may not fully understand, but the beneficiary does have their own series of, kind of you said is, hey, what do I need from this? And then that may or may not align to the funder. And what I like about your point is that it's important. So what we see at times is kind of the first example I gave, where an organization may have a lot of clarity on what is missing in society and why they need to address this, not necessarily the what, but the why it is critical. But often what is missing is that the beneficiary doesn't have clarity on why that step needs to be in place, because they're seeing maybe a different need that needs to be addressed as well. But where the organization may be focused on how do I create systemic change, and the beneficiary may not fully understand change yet, which would make sense. If I'm in a neighborhood, I may have a different scope than what it means to actually create positive change in multiple neighborhoods. around me. And to your point, the donor may also have their own lens from which hopefully they're thinking about impact, but not all are, right?
Yeah.
But on making sure that we have aligning to what is their motivation as a donor. I really like that process of making sure that we're thinking about each constituency's why. And then from what I'm hearing you say, basically that we are mapping those out or overlaying those so that we've got clarity. And then whatever metric that we bring to the table should be able to ensure that those constituencies are getting what they need. Am I hearing that?
You're hearing that exactly right. So I always am envious of like CPAs because they can have this, standardized accounting general principle.
Right.
But in the nonprofit space, you're right. Every nonprofit may have slightly unique, different things that they need to measure in order to talk about impact because their whys are different. And, especially if you're dealing with, and I love what you said about the beneficiaries might have different needs that the nonprofit's not thinking about. I love to talk about youth, right? If we have a nonprofit that's serving youth, as much as we might want to improve their social emotional learning or their lifetime earning potential, I've got 4 teenagers and most of them are not thinking much about that on any given day. So if I'm putting them into a nonprofit, what are they looking to? What do they want? They want a fun space, a safe space, an engaging space, right? They need the programming to be culturally responsive and relevant to them as a young person. And so we have to make sure that we're meeting the participants where they are and meeting their whys. Because if we don't do that at the very core, then we'll never be able to increase their social emotional learning if that is our desired, outcome or goal that we're looking to achieve.
Right.
So, but our funder, they may be interested in, when I was talking about the juvenile court program, they may be interested in, I have taxpayer dollars here and I am stewards of those. And it's expensive to put a child through a detention program run by the county or the state. And so my job is to make sure that your programming makes it so that doesn't have to happen. Right. So they have a very dollars and cents mentality. And so you can see how it's all is aligned. Our goals are all aligned, but how we communicate our impact needs to be different for each one of those 3 groups.
Yeah, that's really good. Have you seen, thinking about the value of the data, like when you think about creating meaning out of the data, have you found or seen anything that organizations have done that you've been really impressed in how they have found effective ways to create, share, illustrate the value of the data once they have the right data?
Yeah. So one metric and SureImpact does serve this up to our partners pretty easily is this concept of cost per success. And now I want to be really clear. When I talk about cost per success, I'm not talking about cost per service. I'm talking about looking at those outcomes. So once you know how many clients successfully achieve those outcomes that you're measuring that you desire, and you divide it by the number, how much it costs to deliver those services, and put in your overhead, put in everything it took to get to that one outcome. And then you go to a funder and say, hey, you want children to, successfully graduate and go to, meaningful post-secondary opportunity. It costs our organization $2,300 to get one child to a successful outcome. And so when you have that type of metric, the old model with nonprofit kind of that cost per service, that's damaging because that assumes we have to do more with less. Cost per success actually is like, no, this is what it takes. We can work together to increase that success rate, because if we increase that success rate, we're actually going to decrease our cost per success. But right now, this is what it takes. So it's a different conversation that funders very much appreciate it, because that's what they're buying. They're buying outcomes. That's what they want to buy. And you're helping show them how to get to those outcomes and why your organization is best positioned to be the ones to deliver those outcomes.
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it. I like the cost per success. And I mean, to your point, 2001, Stanford identified the starvation model of nonprofit growth, which is just finally the academic research validating that the the average nonprofit organization is structured to starve itself. And a lot of that comes from community donor pressures. And I kind of toy with the example of, if I were going to go out and, set out to create the most reliable car manufacturer or car company, I wouldn't start out telling my engineers, we're going to make the most reliable car, but by the way, I need you to cut every possible corner in it. And that was Stanford's point, was that we build organizations to starve the infrastructure. And so we're telling them, hey, we want the success, to your point, Sheri, but we want you to cut every corner possible to get there. And that's not a workable equation.
Yeah.
I like what you're saying. When we frame it as cost per success, now our focus is on the positive outcome and the cost equation that leads us there.
Yep. Yeah. And I love that metric too, because what we find is if you do start to cut costs, you're like, oh, all right, well, now we know, let's say it's $2,300 to get to one successful outcome, but we're going to, shave a session off or maybe take away this particular service. And then you start to see your outcome rate go down, your success rate go down. Well, now that was a bad idea.
Right.
Because you're not measuring to a cost reduction, you're actually measuring to the outcome, and you continue to measure to the outcome when you change your business model or you change, your investment structure. It's actually, in my opinion, the nonprofit's true profit is the change that they're creating for their clients. So that's what we should be measuring and managing to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do a lot of work with clients in our firm on really understanding their intervention model, from relief to resourcing or renewal to restoration, and understanding that they're, as vastly different metrics in relief models as opposed to restoration models. But we often train the public to champion relief models, which are going to be lower overhead, high emotional return, short timelines of change, simple models. They're more efficient. They're typically structure and systems driven. Whereas restoration has the big multiplier of change, but it's messy, it's complex, it's long-term delayed change, and it happens typically through people. And that is one of the challenges, I think, that we see in the field a lot, is as you get more into the complex, change relies more on people, which then our overhead should be higher if I'm in a restoration model. But when I try to use old metrics in the field, and we track that cost to service points as opposed to outcomes, or to use your language, the cost of success, we end up in many times catastrophic models of understanding.
Yeah.
I really like the way you frame that. A couple things that I found as well, and I won't name organizations, but there are, as within the donor management world, because historically, just using I've been in this field for a long time, and since the early 90s, mid 90s, and historically there have not been a lot of good platforms outside of maybe one or two really elite platforms, which were cost prohibitive for the majority of the field, that have done a good job at being able to capture outcomes and evaluation data. And from, as I've learned about SureImpact, I've been very, very impressed with what you brought to the table on this platform. And we have some clients that use it as well. What I'm finding a little bit more of, and I'm just curious if there's a question you can equip our audience with to navigate this. So the thing that I'm finding in this space now is that, because finally we're at a place where donors, partners, and many times leaders in our own organizations are finally driving the question of, did this matter? Like, why care about our service if it's not creating change? And what is the change? All the things that you and I have been talking about. That now there's a lot of organizations trying to get into that ballpark with platforms, with approaches, and they're basically trying to recreate their software that was never designed to be an outcomes management platform to become a outcomes management program evaluation platform, kind of a do-all. And I tell clients, like, if there's a platform that specializes in what you need, you really ought to look at that first.
Yeah.
Before you go somewhere where they've tried to just make something that's designed for something else into what they think you need. Do you have a couple questions that our audience should use? Let's say that they're trying to evaluate now, becoming a little bit more sophisticated in a good way, like really being strategic at capturing good data and outcomes, and they're maybe overwhelmed with everybody who's trying to get into the space. Are there a couple questions that you can equip them with as we close that you would say can make sure that they get to true north in a sense?
Yeah, I think, and that's a really good point. SureImpact, we have the advantage that we came to be in 2018. We got to build ourselves with newer technology that wasn't available in the mid 90s when a lot of these different platforms were kind of coming into the world. So that's something I'll recognize that we do have an advantage over some others. But some questions that I would ask if you're looking at, okay, is this the right platform for me to help me make it easier for me to track, measure, and communicate my impact, is that if we really want to understand the relationship of our data, we're going to need to be able to understand who we're serving and their demographics. We need to be able to link that then with what we did with them and the activities that we performed. And then we need to attach that to the results that we're getting for them and the outcomes that we're getting from them. And then we should be able to see those dashboards, those metrics, those analytics, that cost per success I mentioned, that should be coming to us in almost as real time as our team are interacting with the people that we serve. And so if you don't have that, just kind of those answers, if your board chair says, hey, what is our cost per success for the last quarter, for example, if you can't answer that at your fingertips, if you have to go and, ask John, the program director, and he's spending 8 hours crunching numbers to get you those results, then maybe it's time to look for more new innovative platforms designed for the nonprofit today.
Okay, that's good. So using kind of my kind of paraphrasing around that, what I'm hearing you say is that if I understand the whys that we talked about earlier, it should be able to not only integrate those whys through data, but give it to me very easily and not feel complex or cumbersome.
Yeah, and it should be easy for your staff to use as well. So they have they can have insight into their own impact, because if, people work at our nonprofits because they want to make a difference, and that's what's going to motivate them. If they can log in and see, oh, wow, last month I had an 89% success rate for all the clients that I served, and having that every day. I mean, we all know why we like social media so much is because it gives us dopamine when we see those likes. Right. And so it almost if you have a system that's feeding your staff that kind of positive reinforcement as well, it's going to motivate them to continue to do a great job and deliver value to your beneficiaries as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So understand those 3 whys between us, our donors, and the beneficiaries. Ensure we've got harmony and that we understand them. And I would say then we're translating them. And then make sure that from that, we start to really continue to dig deep into understanding what is our cost per success, which means that we need to understand what success is based on those 3 whys, and then ensure whatever we're using, whether it's Excel Access or a platform designed for it or something that's tried to make itself into it, that it's easy to use, it's not cumbersome, that we're able to see ourselves in it, and we can also understand the impact that staff has as they're engaging with it.
Yep. You got it, Jamie.
Perfect. Well, I sure appreciate your time. This has been really insightful. Very excited about what you're doing in this space. It's much needed, and it has been, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.